In the bustling streets of Lagos, where downfall buses hung like angry geese and generators hummed their eternal songs, lived a man who believed he was God's gift to women. His name was Charles, but everyone in Surulere called him Thunder, not because he was particularly loud, but because every relationship he touched got struck by lightning and burned to the ground faster than you could say Jack. Charles was the kind of man who ironed his shirt twice, wore cologne that could wake the dead, and practiced his charming smile in every reflective surface he passed. He drove a fairly used Toyota Camry that he treated like a Rolls Royce and lived in a two-bedroom apartment that he called his executive mansion. But beneath all the swagger and carefully groomed beard, there was a man with the emotional control of a 2-year-old who had been denied candy. Charles had what his sister Adana politely called anger management issues and what his neighbors simply called wahala. When other men got frustrated, they might raise their voices or storm out for a walk. When Charles got angry, things got broken. Plates, phones, mirrors, and once an entire set of plastic chairs that had the misfortune of being nearby when his favorite club, Chelsea, lost. His friends at the local parlor had given him a colorful nicknames over the years. Some called him Breaker Breaker because he could demolish household items faster than Lagos demolition crew. Others preferred Oga Scatter Maintain for his remarkable ability to turn any peaceful evening into what looked like a small-scale war zone and still remain in charge. But his personal favorite name, though he never admitted it, was Lagos Tyson. And after 3 girlfriends in 2 years had packed their bags and disappeared into the night like they were escaping from prison. The first one, Chioma, lasted exactly 4 months before she left screaming, "You need Jesus, not a girlfriend." The second, Mitchell, made it to 6 months before vanishing one evening, leaving behind only her slippers and a text message that read, "I choose life abeg." The third one, Zana, had shown even the most promise, staying for almost 8 months before she fled for her life at 3 a.m. after Charles received too many WhatsApp messages from her female cousin and smashed her phone. Neighbors were left in awe. By this time, even his barber was concerned. "Oga Charles," Mr. Sule said, maybe you should try anger management classes. They have them in our church at Yaba." But Charles just laughed and waved it off. "Baba, these women, they just don't understand. They don't need soft men. That's how feminism started. They want soft boys who will let them walk over them. Me, I have standards." His sister Adana reached her breaking point after the third girlfriend's evacuation. She stormed into his flat one Saturday afternoon angrily, found him lounging on his couch, watching Premier League highlights, and delivered a speech that made their mother very proud to call her "my daughter." "Charles, what is wrong with you? Are you looking for a wife or practicing for WWE? Do you want a wife or a punching bag?" She planted her hands on her hips in the universal African woman stance of, "You're about to get some sense knocked into you." Charles rolled his eyes and continued flipping through TV channels. "Adana, abeg, these Lagos girls, they have no respect. They provoke me. What do you expect me to do when they disrespect me in my own house? Control yourself." Adana's voice reached a pitch that could shatter glass. "You are 34 years old. What do you want? To remain single to the second coming of Christ?" He shrugged with the nonchalance of a man who had clearly not learned the lesson. "It's not my fault. Women these days, they can't handle real men. They want these soft Instagram boys who will say yes ma to everything." Adana stared at him with a mixture of pity and frustration that only a sister can muster. "You know what? I pray you meet the right woman who will reset your brains," Charles said boastfully, almost angry. "Ada, please. There is no woman born of a man who can intimidate me. Do you know who I am? Charles Thunder Okafor from Unewi. My grandfather, he wrestled lions in the village." "Your grandfather was a tall abeg," Adana replied dryly. but enjoy your pride. One day, you will definitely meet your match. Little did Charles know that his match was about to walk into his life at a party in Victoria Island, wearing a green dress and carrying the kind of quiet confidence that should have been his first warning sign. Her name was Amara Okechukwu, and she was the kind of woman who made conversations pause when she entered a room, not because she was the loudest or the most dramatic, but because she carried herself like someone who had never needed to prove anything to anyone. She had the serene smile of someone at peace with herself, and the steady gaze of someone who had seen enough of life not to be impressed by surface things. When Charles first spotted her at the party, sitting calmly at table 7 and politely declining advances of 3 different men, he felt something strange happen with his chest. His heart actually stuttered, like a generator running out of fuel. For the first time in years, he found himself nervous about approaching a woman. He spent nearly 20 minutes in the hotel's bedroom, adjusting his collar and practicing his opening line. When he finally worked up the courage to walk over to the table, he deployed his most devastating weapon, the smile that had charmed its way out of countless situations. "Good evening, beautiful. I'm Charles," he said, extending his hand with the confidence of a man who had never been rejected. Amara looked up from her jollof rice, smiled politely. "I'm Amara, nice to meet you." That was it. No giggling, no blushing, no immediate swooning over his charm, just simple politeness. Charles was intrigued. They talked for the rest of the evening, and for the first time in his adult life, Charles found himself actually listening to what a woman was saying, rather than just waiting for his turn to speak. Amara told him about her work as a nurse at the University Teaching Hospital of Lagos, her love for Nollywood, and someday opening her own clinic in her hometown in Enugu. She asked thoughtful questions about his work in import and export and seemed genuinely interested in his answers. By the time the DJ started playing All of Me by John Legend, Charles was completely smitten. He asked for her number with uncharacteristic humility, half expecting her to politely decline. Instead, she smiled, took his phone and typed in her details. "I'll call you tomorrow," he promised. "I'll be waiting," she replied, and something in the way he said it made his heart jiggle. That night, Charles lay awake, staring at the bedroom ceiling, replaying every moment of their conversation, like a secondary school boy in love. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about what he could get from a woman, but what he might be able to give. The feeling was both terrifying and exhilarating. He called her the next afternoon, as promised. Then, the day after that, and their calls became regular. For 3 whole weeks, they talked on phone every morning, afternoon and evening, sharing stories about their families, their dreams, their fears, and their favorite childhood memories. Charles found himself looking forward to these conversations more than anything else in his day. When he finally asked her out on a proper date, she suggested a small restaurant in Ikeja that served the best pepper soup in Lagos, not a fancy hotel or expensive eatery where he could show off his financial status, but a simple place where they could talk without distractions. This really impressed Charles. The date was perfect. Amara was funny without being loud, intelligent without being intimidating, and beautiful without seeming to know it. She listened when he spoke, laughed at his jokes, even the bad ones, and challenged his opinions in ways that made him think, rather than making him defensive. For the first time since secondary school, Charles felt like he was falling in love rather than just pursuing a conquest. But more importantly, for the first time in his adult life, he felt motivated to be a better man. He didn't want to scare this one away. He couldn't afford to let his temper ruin what felt like the best thing that had ever happened to him. So, Charles made a decision that shocked everyone who knew him. He decided to change. The transformation began immediately. Charles started doing something he had never done before. He began studying his own anger like a scientist, examining a dangerous chemical. He noticed the warning signs, the tightening in his chest, the heat rising in his face, the way he clenched his fist. And for the first time in his life, when he felt these signs, he forced himself to stop, breathe, instead of react. The first test came 2 weeks into the official relationship. Amara had borrowed his car to visit her mother in Festac, and when she returned it, there was a small scratch on the bumper. The old Charles would have exploded like a faulty transformer. He would have shouted about respect and responsibility until the neighbors checked if someone was being murdered. Instead, when Amara sheepishly pointed out the scratch and offered to pay for the repair, Charles felt the similar fire building in his chest. His jaw clenched, his nostrils flared, his hands began to ball into fists. But then, he looked at her face, worried, apologetic, and beautiful, and something inside him shifted immediately. He closed his eyes, took 3 deep breaths, like he had seen people do in movies, and managed to say, "It's okay, baby. It's just a small scratch. These things happen." Amara's eyes widened in surprise, something that looked like relief. "Are you sure? I know how much you love this car." "I love you more than the car, baby," he heard himself say, and was shocked to realize he meant it. That night, he locked himself in the bedroom and punched the air for 5 full minutes straight, shadowboxing with his reflection until the urge to break something finally passed. Then, he splashed cold water on his face and grinned at himself in the mirror. "You can do this, Charles," he whispered to his reflection. "You can be better." Word of Charles's transformation through Surulere, faster than political scandal. His friends at the bear parlor were convinced he was either seriously ill or under some kind of spell. His barber, Malam Sule, kept asking if he was sure he was truly okay. Even his neighbors began to worry when they hadn't heard sound of him breaking things in over a month. "Oga, are you okay?" his neighbor Mama Kemi asked one morning as he was leaving for work. "We haven't heard your voice again. Are you sick?" "I'm fine, Mama Kemi. I'm just learning to be more peaceful." She stared at him suspiciously. "Peaceful? You? Did someone use a spell on you?" But Charles just smiled and continued to his car, whistling a gospel song he had learned from Amara. The truth was, maintaining this new peaceful personality was like trying to hold back a flood with his bare hands. Every day brought new tests of his resolve. When Amara accidentally broke the screen of his favorite gold wristwatch, he had to excuse himself to the balcony, grip the railings until his knuckles turned white. When she mistakenly deleted a playlist of his favorite action movies on Netflix, he had to pretend to go buy drinks while he went to the nearest public toilet to scream. But each time he successfully controlled himself, each time he chose peace over explosion, he felt a little strange within. More importantly, he saw how Amara looked at him with growing respect and admiration. She would smile at him with genuine warmth, and her praises became more addictive than any drug. "I love how patient you are," she told him one evening, after he had calmly handled a waiter who spilled soup on his favorite trousers. So many men would have caused a scene, but he just laughed it off. That's a sign of a mature man. Charles glowed under her praise like a plant receiving sunlight. This was what he had been missing all his life. A woman who appreciated his strength when it was used for protection rather than destruction. 6 months later, Charles proposed to Amara at the same beach where they had the second date. He genuinely believed he had conquered his demons. The ring was beautiful and his speech was heartfelt. And when she said yes with tears in her eyes, he felt like the luckiest man in Nigeria. The wedding planning process was a miracle of compromise and patience. When Amara's mother insisted on inviting 200 people instead of the 50 they had originally planned, Charles smiled and agreed. When the caterer doubled the price 2 weeks before the wedding, he breathed deeply, found the extra money, and when his own mother tried to start a fight with the in-laws over tradition and protocol, he diplomatically sorted things out instead of taking sides. Everyone was amazed by the transformation, and Anna kept staring at her brother like he had been replaced by an alien. "Are you sure this is my brother?" she asked Amara privately. "The same Charles who once broke a plate because his food was too hot." Amara laughed and assured her that yes, this was the same man, just improved by love. The wedding itself was beautiful, with all their friends and family in attendance. Charles looked handsome in his white suit, and Amara looked breathtaking in her white wedding dress. During his speech at the reception, Charles promised his new wife and all their guests that he was a changed man, ready to be the husband Amara deserved. "I used to think being a man meant being loud and demanding respect," he said. "But my wife has taught me that real strength is quiet, real power is gentle, and real love is patient. I promise to love and protect her with wisdom, not just with passion." The crowd erupted in applause, and even some of his old friends who had witnessed his previous relationship disasters were moved to tears. Someone from the crowd screamed, "Even thunder can be this loving. God, am I a spoon?" As they danced to their favorite song, "All of Me" by John Legend, Charles whispered into Amara's ears, "I'm going to be the best husband Lagos has ever seen." For the first 1 month of their marriage, Charles maintained his saintly behavior with the dedication of a monk, pursuing enlightenment. He woke up early to make breakfast, helped with household chores without being asked, and continued to swallow his anger whenever small irritations arose. When Amara accidentally scratched his PS5 while cleaning it, he smiled and said, "It's fine, babe." When she invited her girlfriends over, on the same day he planned to watch a crucial Chelsea match, he graciously relocated to the bedroom with his laptop. As Amara was convinced she had married a saint, her friends were jealous of how supportive and understanding her husband was. Even her mother, who had been initially skeptical of any man who was still single at 34, began to brag about her son-in-law to anyone who would listen. But like all pressure cookers, Charles had a limit, and that limit was about to be tested by a series of small events that would accumulate like rain in a blocked gutter. It started on a stressful Wednesday. Charles had arrived home to find out that Amara had rearranged their house, especially the living room, without consulting him. His carefully positioned entertainment center had been moved. His collection of football magazines had been reorganized into a box, and his lucky chair, the one he liked sitting during Chelsea's last championship victory, had been replaced with what Amara cheerfully called a more stylish option. "Surprise!" she said, gesturing around the room with obvious pride. "I thought he could use a fresh look, babe. Don't you just love it?" Charles stood in the doorway, his eyes twitching slightly as he surveyed the changes. The old Charles was exploding with him immediately. The new Charles forced a smile and said, It looks different. Nice, honey." But that night, as Amara lay sleeping, he sat awake looking at the ceiling, feeling like a stranger in his own home. The final straw came on a Saturday afternoon when Arsenal was playing Chelsea in what sports commentators were calling the match of the century. Charles had been looking forward to this game for weeks. He had arranged his whole weekend around it. He had even bought special snacks for the occasion. As the match was about to begin, Amara curled up on a couch with her tablet, seemingly content to scroll through social media while he watched his game. 20 minutes into the first half, with Chelsea leading 1-0, and Charles completely absorbed in the action when the decoder suddenly disconnected with a message on the screen saying their subscription had expired. Amara was supposed to pay for the subscription the week before. The silence that followed was deafening. Charles stared at the TV screen dramatically. Then he looked at Amara, who seemed completely unbothered. Then back at the TV, then back at Amara. That was when he lost it. The real Charles came roaring like a wounded lion. His vision became very sharp. He was very focused. He could see individual particle dust floating in the air, could hear the tick of the wall clock, could feel his breath in his eardrums. Woman, were you not supposed to recharge this decoder? I gave you the money long ago. You are so irresponsible. Amara's mouth opened wide, but no words came out. She swallowed hard. Charles was about storming out to a nearby viewing center to finish watching the match. Amara's fingers closed around his wrists like a steel trap. Her grip was firm, steady, and completely confident. She looked up at him with eyes that shifted from the warm wife to something completely different. Baby, she said in a voice that was calm, but carried an undertone he had never heard before. Let this be the first and last you ever call me names. But Charles made a brutal mistake. His ego led him. He lifted up his free hand to slap Amara. What happened next was the talk of Surulere for years to come. With a movement so quick and smooth, it seemed almost choreographed. Amara stood up and somehow managed to flip Charles over her shoulders in one fluid motion. He landed on the carpet with a thud that shook the entire compound and probably rattled the dishes in the kitchen. For a moment, the only sound Charles could hear were his bones cracking in real time. Charles lay on his back, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how he had gone from standing upright to flat on the ground in less than 3 seconds while wincing in pain. His ribs ached, his pride was in shambles, and his brain was struggling to process what just happened. Amara stood over him. "Are you hot, babe? Do you need help standing up?" She asked as if she had just helped him off a bus rather than thrown him across the room. What? How did you? Charles's voice came out as a crook. Amara explained matter-of-factly. 2 years of taekwondo classes in South Korea. I told you I schooled in South Korea, remember? But I didn't mention that I was a taekwondo master. She extended her help to help him up, but Charles was too shocked to move. That evening, Charles sat outside with his hand on his chin, thinking brutally about the earlier incident. Before now, he was certain he had no business with Floyd Mayweather's family. But now, it felt like he married Floyd's sister. "Are you okay, honey?" Amara asked sweetly, as if nothing happened. Fine, Charles managed to whisper, just thinking. "About what's there?" "About how I may have seriously underestimated my wife." Amara smiled. Most people do. As Amara turned to go back into the sitting room, Charles flinched in fear, and Amara chuckled and said, "I'm just going inside." The next morning, Charles woke up to find Amara preparing his favorite breakfast while humming a gospel song. She kissed him good morning, as if she hadn't thrown him across the room the night before. She asked about his plans for the day. It was so normal, so perfect, out of the ordinary. Charles was beginning to wonder if the incident was in his dream or real, but his cracked bones kept reminding him they were real. His sore ribs reminded them it was very, very real. At work, he moved carefully, like someone recovering from an accident. His colleagues noticed his unusual quietness, but he blamed it on poor night's sleep. During his lunch break, he asked his sister, "Adana," he said without preamble, "what do you know about Amara's family?" "Your wife? Why? Is everything okay? Just tell me. Do you know she has taekwondo skills?" "Yes, but why are you asking out?" Wait, no, you didn't." Amara burst into laughter and she nearly choked on her saliva. That evening, as Charles got home, he approached his house as a man entering a potentially dangerous area. Amara greeted him at the door with her usual warm smile. Everything seemed perfectly normal until he noticed she had been moving around the kitchen with a kind of grace that was so efficient he had never paid attention to before. Her movements were precise, beautiful and gentle, but definitely capable of defending itself. During dinner, Charles kept staring at Amara's fingers. "You're staring at me," Amara observed in amusement. "Just admiring my wife." Meanwhile, Charles was looking at the supposedly soft hands that had lifted a grown man off the floor and broke his ribs. After dinner, they settled to watch TV. "Would you like to watch the highlights of the match?" Amara asked. No, I'm not interested in footballs anymore," Charles replied, skeptical. For the first time in his adult life, he was with someone whom he couldn't intimidate, whom he couldn't manipulate, whom he couldn't control through force or anger. Instead of being terrifying, it was actually peaceful. When conflicts arose, and in any marriage, conflicts will definitely arise, they were resolved through actual conversations rather than through Chelsea's old method of shouting until he got his way. Because now he knew that shouting wouldn't work, and more importantly, he discovered he didn't need it to work. Amara, for her own part, never lauded her strength over Charles again. She simply went back to being the beautiful and thoughtful wife she was. She never brought up the incident, never threatened him, never made him feel small for having been outmatched. She simply went back to being the loving, supportive wife she had always been, with quiet confidence of someone who knew she had nothing left to prove. Please share with me your thoughts, comments on this story, like, share and subscribe if you haven't done so by now. Till I bring you another interesting African story, God bless you.